Baby, you have to find the room number. This is your only chance of escaping this place. Find the room number before the hurricane passes. Or you will never leave.
Okay, Miss Barrett, are you ready?
Am I ready for what?
To be discharged. Unless you want to stay.
My name is Christopher Chapman. I am a filmmaker, and I live in Florida.
How did you get started in the film industry?
Well, I was in, that's kind of complicated. Well, it's a good question, actually, because I started, and I always wondered how most people get started in film. I think a lot of people maybe go to cinematography school or film school, something like that. But I actually got started, I went to law school. And so lawyers write, do a lot of reading and writing, and lawyers do a lot of writing. And so and I always liked creative writing. I had written, I'd always been writing, and I wrote something that has now been published. It was published a couple of years ago, a love story called The Accident. No, what am I saying? That was a movie I did. A love story called The Picnic Table that's on Amazon and iBooks and other things. It's hard copy, and then you can get it in an electronic version. But anyway, it's a love story. And then I had done still photography for commercial print. And so that would be, some freelance for local magazines, things that ended up, either going to shoot something maybe potentially boring, like inside of a restaurant, all the way up to maybe like a club scene to, say, a model. And at that point, you got to, for those that haven't really taken still photography too seriously, especially when working with a model, is you're really getting to direct them. And there's a big difference between someone that doesn't know what they're doing from a modeling standpoint to a real, true professional model. And so they take direction better. And so anyway, you take those two, combine them together, and lo and behold, I decided one year I had this shorter story that I wanted to just make into a film, and I just wanted to see if I could produce it and get the proper locations and things. So, I started building that, and in that journey, I ended up meeting kind of a team of people out in Los Angeles that I ended up doing a couple shorts with, and then we shot that movie that I was talking about that was called The Accident, and so that's kind of how I got it. My stepfather worked for NBC during the initial Mercury Gemini and Apollo program, and he got to work in that world with all the space race astronaut stuff. So I got to kind of through hand-me-down paraphernalia, for lack of a better term, I got to kind of experience a little bit of that world through him. And then, but he was always toting around a big video camera, back when you had to carry like the VHS backpack almost, and then you'd carry the camera itself. And we play around with it. I always thought that was cool. So I guess that's maybe the morphing of it.
How did you jump from one genre to another, going from comedy to...
Well, so my first, I like drama, right? So for me, that's how it was easier for drama. But what happened really with how the jump occurred into horror or thrillers is Brian Nagel, who I worked with on The Accident. He was the lead in The Accident. And I met, Brian. I really like Brian. And through Brian, I met his brother, Tom. And they were in pre-production or on Clowntown. And so we had a couple meetings about that. I was interested. And then, so I was working on Clowntown. I was actually in Clowntown, which is funny. But I met Jeff Miller through Clowntown. We were on set, and I met Jeff before that, but we started working together on set. And he asked me one day, you ever thought about shooting a horror film? me writing and directing, and so that started for Inoperable. And he had given me some things that he was looking for. His head, he's always got his feelers or his kind of hand on the pulse of horror, and either through just his own intelligence, distributors that he knows or whatever, he kind of knows what the market's looking for, I suppose. And so he'll say, hey, look, can you tell us a story about, this issue, this issue, this issue, this issue, combine it together. And that's kind of like with Clowntown, he had done some research and found that creepy clowns were really big, and he timed it just perfect. I mean, remember all those, after we had been done filming, is when all that weird, remember that clown craze was going on, which is weird. And people were like dressed up as clowns in the woods and scaring people. And so, and that was long before it. I mean, it had been written clearly in the 80s or whenever it was written, but before they shot it again. So, but then on Inoperable, so Jeff gave me, he certain things he was looking for. So let me try to take a stab at writing. And so I write in more, I don't really write in script format. I just write more in story format. So like novel. So I just started writing and sent it back and forth and tweaked it, and we had the script for Inoperable at that point. So
how did the script from Inoperable come about? What was the basis for, or what was the inspiration for?
Well, I think, I don't really remember exactly what his kind of initial thoughts were. I think it was more, he had some suggestions, and I don't remember the exact kind of spark that got the hospital part, but I do recall a decent part of it from my own perspective was when, I think it was 2004, I had gotten food poisoning or bad food or something. Food poisoning makes it sound like you're poisoned, but it was just whatever the food was not good, and there's salmonella or whatever. Ended up in the hospital, and there was a tropical storm or hurricane down south, and my imagination runs wild, and I thought it wouldn't be weird if the power went out in here and there was like a serial killer on the loose and couldn't do anything. I mean, imagine being a patient and you can't, you're either, I don't know, you just had heart surgery, or your appendix is just removed. You're not going to get up and run around and fight off bad guys. So I felt that was kind of a fun basis for it. So we kind of took the ball and ran with it in that regard.
How was it like working with horror royalty like Danielle Harris?
Well, she was amazing, like Danielle. I mean, she was amazing. But, truth be told, I'm not, when Jeff was starting to list people that he felt would be good to have on the film. In other words, like he used the term like move the meter, move the needle. And, you can think of it like a, needle peaking on certain names. And so certain names might do this and certain names might, And so he had some names that everybody would recognize. And we had, he had made some calls, and certain people were interested, but the timing was wrong for the time we were going to film it. And then certain people, maybe they wanted more. I don't really know. He dealt with all, Jeff is a master of that. Jeff dealt with all that. But then, I had certain people that I thought were really great actors that, regardless of horror, just actors I liked. And Jeff was really dialed into the horror. So when he mentioned Danielle Harris, and I knew who she was, but I didn't, I wasn't a horror fan, kind of aficionado. So, but people around me, like my wife, knew exactly who she was. And she's like, oh yeah, she started listing movies, and I'm like, oh, that's where, and I figured. And then Jeff was like, well, are you cool with that? Absolutely. So Jeff started talking to her crew, and next thing we know, she was amazing. I mean, really, like, and I feel like, when people are interviewed, directors or producers, and they say, oh, he was incredible to work with, or she was incredible to work with. I don't know those producers or directors, and I don't know who they work with, so how do you know if that's true? But I will say Danielle Harris, just knows it better than, certainly better than I do. So, and she's a director as well. So she knew what to, maybe she didn't know necessarily Amy Barrett or character, and didn't necessarily know what we were actually trying to extract from this. Because it was definitely confusing. But from so there was some direction required, I suppose. But really, I couldn't have imagined now, in retrospect, a better character to play that. I just couldn't imagine. And so now when I think Amy Barrett, it's clearly Danielle Harris. And so I think that happens maybe to, audiences that are really dialed in, like, Pretty Woman is that woman is Julia Roberts. I mean, who could play Pretty Woman other than Julia Roberts? I mean, that's that, so it's like that is Danielle Harris for me as Amy Barrett. So it was amazing, like literally like very little, I just knew every newer line. I mean, there was just, I couldn't, and I haven't worked with that level of, kind of Hollywood, royalty as it were before. And I see why you want to work with people like that. Kind of like when I was using the model reference earlier, is there's a model that I was working with a decent bid who now we're good friends. And it's just when you have somebody that actually knows more of what you're looking for than you do, or more of what the fans are looking for than maybe you do. I didn't, as far as Danielle Harris goes, I mean, my directing hat was usually not, I didn't really need to wear it. So I'm not going to take credit for that. She's amazing. So, yeah.
How was the set chosen?
Oh, wow. That was a lot of work. You came out to set, or I should say Mike came out to set, but we had you were really, Mike, you were probably the only one that came out to set, right? I mean, I think you were the only actual, non either BTS photographer, but you were the only non-crew that came out. So we kept it pretty, well, there were some guests that came by, but it was pretty, not hush-hush, but we kept it pretty discreet. But basically, we wrote it as a hospital, right? And so ideally what you'd think of is I want a hospital to shoot in. But good luck with that, getting a functioning hospital. Like, where are you going to get a functioning hospital and displace patients? Never mind HIPAA and all these other regulations. I don't know how you're going to do that. So, we started, I didn't necessarily, I like shooting in Tampa, but it was the goal, but that wasn't so much of a goal that we were going to blow a budget or something to shoot here. So we were looking at locations all around the U.S., as it were. So Jeff Miller had some locations in L.A., and there are locations that are more or less designed or designable for hospitals. And we looked at one in L.A. It was expensive, and we weren't real confident it was going to look. We were going to have to spend a lot of time and effort in it, and it was just expensive again. And on these indie films, it's one of the things that a lot of filmmakers understand, but, viewers, it's really tough to shoot a film on a low budget. It's very difficult. And something's always going to be sacrificed. It just has to be. And so usually locations are one of the ways you can save money and have these sacrifices. But the backup goal to not finding a fully functioning hospital was I had some relationships with physicians that either ran or owned little surgery centers. And a little surgery center, if you're going to have your a bone. It's not anything where it's not major surgery. You go to these surgery centers, so little procedures, things of that nature. And so the goal was we were going to piece a few of these together. So what you would end up having is, through post-production, it would look like a seamless hospital. Or maybe you're in different wings if, the hospital looked a little different, or the surgery center looked a little different, which was totally fine because in a hospital you have different wings and they look different. So that was what we were working towards, and it was going to be fine. But again, the problem there is these were still functioning surgery centers. So certain days they would have surgery, certain days they wouldn't. So we would have to be filming there the days they didn't have surgery going on, right? So when you shoot a film, 2 to 3 weeks of filming, those days you have to get really coordinated on when you shoot those days. And then if you're dealing with your actors and they're in holding, they're here for 4 days, you're paying them to be here. It gets you start blowing your budget pretty quickly. So ultimately what happened is, through some relationships that I had and then have built along the way, we found this location in Pasco County, in Dade City, which is a small city north of Tampa, west of, say, Orlando. And it had one point been a functioning hospital, very small, but at one point had been a functioning hospital. For its day, it was probably big size. but at one point had been a functioning hospital. It turned in, I think, a county administrative building, then turned into a sheriff's office station, and then I think was then abandoned. Abandoned makes it sound strange, but no longer being used. It was slated to be tore down, and we were lucky enough to get in there. But when you were in this location, really all it was walls, ceiling, electrical, power, water. Maybe not even water, I don't think. But anyway, power and some carpets, something. So everything else you see though in this hospital, we had to design in. So now you'd see some tile. I mean, that was there, but computer equipment, hospital equipment, everything. I mean, that was set design. So that was Bobby Marinelli, Kate Emery, and Bobby and Kate was more pre-pro, but Bobby ran set design. So that was Bobby Marinelli to make it look. And I've had some of the best compliments because, and it might have been one of your articles, if I remember correctly, I'm not really sure, but certainly some articles were written where they said, God, where do they find this hospital that was already, that was a huge compliment to production design because that hospital, there wasn't anything in it. So everything everything everybody sees was designed that way. And because the movie is a bit of a timeline fiasco, right? Or intentionally confusing on timelines, we threw different items in there from different timeline, so the computer monitors might have been from the late 90s. There might be a flat screen TV from 2015. It might be a cell phone from 96 or 2001 or whatever, right? And so we threw in, there's a car from the 70s and there's other cars from modern times. So we kind of, intentionally stirred up the timelines, and with that, we designed items to look like they're from different times. So it's supposed to look like a hodgepodge, kind of. That makes sense. If you think of you're like a time traveler and you have artifacts in your house, you're not just going to have, if you like cameras, you're not just going to have cameras from 2017. You're going to have, you might have the first camera ever made. You might have, this weird camera from 2087 that we've never seen before. So it's kind of like that in Inoperable. So.
Can you tell us some about the crew that you worked with?
Yeah, so starting with me, but going down from there, the assistant director, Ashley Eberbach, filmmaker, she does commercial projects. We've done now 1, 2, 3, I think Inoperable is our fourth project that we did together. And she's a brilliant filmmaker, director. She's the AD. She just go-to person. I just love working with her. And then, cinematography, or the director of photography, Giorgio David, we'd worked with on a couple projects before that. And Giorgio, what I do, right? So I think of it as a department head. So you have AD, and you have cinematographer, and he runs lighting and all that. And then you have Bobby Marinelli, right? And then, costume and special effects makeup and things. But anyway, so Giorgio, what I like, I think the reason Giorgio and I tend to work well together is because I kind of let him take the ball and run with it. And I tell him generally what we're trying to accomplish from a film standpoint and from a story standpoint. But then I just kind of let him do it. I mean, he's the one that is lighting for it, and he's the one shooting it, so a lot of the times he's blocking. I'm still directing from an acting standpoint and general storyline standpoint. There's a feel we're going through, but Giorgio and I spend so much time leading up to production that by the time we're there, we're not really communicating too much. I'm sitting behind the director monitor, and if it looked good for camera and it looked good for acting and it sounded good for sound, then we move on. Especially with Inoperable, because it was pretty fast paced. We didn't have these problem with these lower budget films. You just don't have enough time to sit there and spend all day in one scene and making sure that actor is just spot on. Sometimes you got to kind of move on, and it's annoying. So that's the problem with lower budget films. You just don't have enough time, because you think per day, I don't know what the budget, but I'm just making up a number. You might be spending $8,000 a day, right? So think about it. If you're just not getting something right, we're just going to shoot another day. Not to mention you room and board these people from LA or from New York or wherever they're from, and you got the location. You got to recontract with them. Maybe the weather's not right. So, But Giorgio is great because we would take I let him take big camera risks. So when you see it, and some of the people hopefully had saw it in the theaters by the time they watch this, maybe it should be out in February, in VOD and whatnot. But there's a lot of camera movement, and there's a lot of long shots, oneers, that, I love it when people, kind of, especially or your viewers take special note of that was one take, and the skill needed from camera and acting to get the one take in. I mean, you definitely it's like watching maybe a Super Bowl, I suppose, and, people are cheering when it actually goes right. So, no, the people were, and Bobby Marinelli, I mean, he and I work together on all sorts of things. We've got a project we're about to shoot in about 2 weeks, another local project, horror. And but I just have a great, I mean, it's all about your team. I mean, I'm not really, I kind of put the project together but it's the team that does it. I mean, I really don't, I'm directing it, but it's been so well planned by the time we're actually sitting there that other than pulling my hair out, because you can't fight time, it goes pretty smooth. So,
what was your favorite scene to film?
Okay, there's a couple, right? My favorite scene from just a coolness factor is on one of, we call them resets. I don't know really, it's reset for her for Amy is when she kind of passes out in the hospital. Because remember, she's been in a car wreck and who knows what's been done to her, right? So she passes out, she wakes back up in her car, and then she has a couple seconds or a minute and then boom, she wakes back up in her hospital. So that's like a cycle. We call it almost like a reset. And my favorite is towards the end where there was a reset where she's just kind of mad and she's done with the BS of this hospital. And it's a long shot where we see her in the hospital bed, and then we shift the camera to the right, and we don't break, we're not cutting away, and we just spin the camera, and then you see her walking down a hallway. She goes and picks up a syringe and jams it into one of the nurse's hearts. The nurse collapses, and then she throws the syringe and then walks off. So that's one big long shot, and it just looks awesome because she gets dressed in the same shot. And so you don't break from this. So we do a lot of those. And that one was just cool feeling because, the audience is feeling a little claustrophobic and maybe feeling a little, not depressed, but a little longing for a little fight back. And Amy starts to give it to them. And I really like that scene because it shows the transition more from confused victim to badass. And because that's really the story of Amy. I mean, she starts as confused, who knows what's going on, and in the end, she's just kind of basically a badass. And I think that was my favorite scene to film. We filmed that towards the end, and I just remember the joy in the crew when we got it right. And then I think the funniest scene that I like. The banter between Jen and Ryan. Ryan's the cop and Jen's the attractive girl in the blue dress, and that's Katie Keene and Jeff Denton. And they already knew each other because we worked together in Clowntown. And the banter between them, the two of them, was really funny because they would go off script. And when they're sitting in the hospital waiting room, you hear them kind of like, it's just kind of fun. And it wasn't my favorite. It was just fun to listen to because you'd be sitting behind the director monitor and you hear them just talking. I was like, I hope we're rolling for that. This is really good. And then, but I think my other favorite scene was, it's disturbing, but it's the one where Katie or Jen is laying on the like OB-GYN table, and they're in theory doing an abortion, but she's not pregnant. And she's screaming, I'm not pregnant, I'm not pregnant. And there was a director monitors, it was me and the script supervisor, Lauren Coconato. And then behind us was like, hair and makeup, wardrobe, and it was basically all females. And I remember, I'm deep in concentration watching this, and, I have my reading glasses on and I'm really watching it. And Laura and I are really, and when it's done, you could hear Katie screaming down the hallway because we're probably, 50 yards away, and you can hear her screaming. So you're hearing it here and you're hearing her screaming. And I turn around and just kind of like, and all the girls are like, "You're sick. You're so sick." Like kind of funny, like you're. And I'm well. I mean, that was the reaction kind of I wanted. And so, but those are. I think that. But if you said, well, actually, there's another one that that you should really look out for, and it has a really creepy feel to it, and it just looked right. And that was Giorgio and I really connecting. And there's a scene where, like most, Amy, our hero, is running from the act. She's running away, and you're seeing her shoot down some hallways. Well, she ends up going down a long hallway, and you see the doctor, male doctor, slowly walking methodically towards the camera and towards Amy, and then you see the orderly running. So it's this weird, like, it just has a weird look to it. And, we had some fun with this, and we wanted to make it feel a little third-person shooter, kind of not really shooter, but we're almost like it has a little bit of a video game feel to where you're kind of moving around with Amy like you're her buddy or your whatever sidekick, and that one certainly had that feeling.
Can you tell us some about the dismembered cow?
Okay, I didn't know any. Yeah, you were there that day. I didn't know any of that. This was so funny. I remember. All I remember is Bobby showing up with some cow parts, but like most things, the way I treated that is they were like kind of department heads. It's almost like they worked for the film company and not really me, Whereas Phil Jesson was the unit production manager, and it was almost like he kind of. You gotta like set up. You gotta kind of like section everything out. So there's a point where you don't really know what they're doing. And you just, so yeah, but basically the cow stuff shows up, and what is this, and okay, go ahead and whatever, I guess. And so Bobby throws it in there, and I like stuff a little more subtle, but Jeff Miller's like, let's get it out there. So Jeff kind of went in there and played with it, and then, but it smelled pretty bad. It was when people were gagging, like I was in another. I mean, you could smell it down the hallway where I was, but it was not good. It stunk. But what the cool thing is, I guess where it was in a drainable location, and they cleaned it out pretty well. Like I think an hour later, it just smelled like bleach, and I don't think none of it actually went down because it wasn't actually liquid blood. It was just bloody looking, and then the stuff disappeared, and that was the end of it. So for me anyway, so I don't know. But it was gross. It was real stuff. But apparently that's kind of like not uncommon on some horror sets, I think. I don't know. I mean, that was crazy to me, but I'm not so sure how uncommon that is in retrospect. I mean, lower budget, I guess you go to a butcher and grab some stuff. Why not, I suppose? It looks real. So, yeah, but, I wish I knew more about that. That's, it just kind of showed up, and I heard stories of how disgusting it was, and transporting it apparently was not the most entertaining. And Bobby had enlisted Michelle Beebs, who helped him with that, and a couple other people. So, that's all I know about that, unfortunately. So that was a better story if I knew more. But
after you saw the final product, was there anything that you wanted to change?
Well, I was part of the editing. I was part of it the whole time. So, I was out in California with editing, and yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, there was some. I mean, we it was very true to script. Like, it wasn't in post. It wasn't like we did anything different. We utilized some shots where she's looking, I believe, where she's looking at her watch, where we intentionally used the same shot, even though we had other coverage. Yeah, there's a couple things that looking back, I wish I would have changed, but I mean, I think there always, will be. But the sound was very clean. We had to ADR. A little bit. But yeah, because like some of the outside shots, it was just too noisy. There was like a school up the road, and you'd hear school buses going by, an airplane be flying overhead. And it was weird. There was like a cell phone tower. There was some sort of radio tower. And depending on where you were, your self signal was bad, but we didn't really care about that. It was more your focus, your remote focus pulling. You'd lose data, so that was annoying. So you had to get video, you had to get the monitor real close, but then it was real bright out or real hazy, so you couldn't really see. There's just problems you have to work through. But yeah, as far as what if I had to change some things, maybe had a few more takes on certain scenes. But I mean, overall, for the money and for the, we got what? Almost 18.5 million or more now, 18.5 million views on our trailer alone, on our channel alone. I mean, somebody likes it, I guess. Or somebody really hates it. But 18.5 million, I'm sure some of that's going to translate to people renting it, right? I would hope. So, yeah, I mean, I think it overall it's turned out pretty well. I mean, but I think there's always stuff, you would change. I mean, I just, my brain, when I think of production and what I want it to look like, it's never going to look as good as it does in my head. It just never, it's maybe half as good. But then again, you pick up some things that you never would have thought about, through having great team members. So like cinematography and picking up stuff and production design you never would have thought about. So I would say overall, yeah, I mean, maybe as happy as you can be. I mean, I'm not real impressed with myself. So I try to be, hard on myself to where when I do something again, I learn from mistakes that maybe other people don't think I made, but that I certainly see. So,
when will Inoperable be available, and where can people find it?
Well, yeah, it had a theatrical run. That was in December, but now I'm being told I think it's like the second week of February, and I think they usually release on Tuesdays. I want to say, so it's going to be. I should know more about this, but it's like I think it's the second Tuesday in February, but. What I'm being told is VOD, Walmart, and I don't know if Redbox has confirmed, certainly overseas, and I think there's some other, there is a certain service everybody's heard about that has not been confirmed yet, so I don't want to use it, but if that happens, that's really cool.